I want to introduce very briefly now, and then I'll come back and introduce more fully Wang Zhongying, who's the Deputy Director of the Energy Research Institute for the National Development and Reform Commission for the Chinese government, who has traveled a very, very long distance to be with us here today. And as I've done for the past sessions, let me just take a couple of minutes and try to frame this, and then we will jump in. Those of you who have been here before, I've asked this every time, who's been here before for these sessions? Excellent, that's great, so you guys know the drill. But the drill basically is that this is not going to be a long slide presentation, this is not going to be a long monologue, we're going to have a discussion, and we'll leave about 15 minutes for questions and answers involving all of you. Given that many of you have been here before, this is going to be a bit of a repeat, but let me just sort of kind of frame this a second. I first want to thank, again, the Precourt Institute for Energy and the Steyer-Taylor Center for Energy Policy and Finance colleagues there who have been very, very supportive and very helpful in the long months that it's taken to plan all of this. And I'll say, as I said before, that whereas a lot of these energy seminars typically have looked at the technologies themselves, looked at the possibilities for technologies themselves, what we're going to do here is follow the money. We're going to look less at the specifics of the technologies and more at the questions, the market realities of trying to scale up these technologies. And as will come as no surprise to you, we're going to look at this primarily in China. Why? As we've all discussed before, China is the world's largest carbon emitter. China is the world's largest energy consumer. And in a very real sense, the fate of all of these technologies and their impact both on energy markets and on the environment depends on what happens in China. Let me just say one last thing, and that is that we're also going to talk here, and Zhongying has a particularly interesting perspective, having done a lot of traveling himself among China, Europe, and the US, on the difference between China and the US in terms of markets for a lot of these technologies, the difference in markets and also the difference in policy regimes, something I think we really need to keep in mind as we assess all of this. So let me say a little bit more about Wang Zhongying. So Zhongying arrived yesterday from Beijing, a couple hours late because United didn't deliver on its on-time promise. But Zhongying is, as I said, Deputy Director of the NDRC's Energy Research Institute, has spent 15 or 20 years at the Energy Research Institute. Initially was doing work related to coal-fired power generation, and in the mid-1990s shifted to focusing on renewable energy. So he's a fascinating personification of China's interest in cleaner forms of energy, has essentially lived this effort for the past 2 decades, now heads an organization that was just created by the Chinese government called the National Renewable Energy Center, part of ERI. So we will launch in just a second. Let me just take 2 minutes and show a couple slides that I showed last time just to get us on the same page. Okay, very, very quickly. Can you see this, Zhongying? Can you see these behind us? So this is from the International Energy Agency. And again, as I said last time, this is essentially the world CO2 situation. The light orange is essentially today. The dark orange is 2035, about 20 years from now. What do you see? You see that emissions are projected to decline in the developed world, the United States, the industrialized world, the United States, the EU, and Japan. They're expected to rise, notably in China and India. And the other thing that you see is if you look at the distance between the light orange and dark orange in the US and the EU and Japan, that is the amount that emissions are expected to decline, annual emissions, and you add those gaps up, it's actually smaller than the increase in China. That is to say, Chinese CO2 emissions are expected to increase from now through 2035 more than they are expected to decrease in the US, the EU, and Japan combined. That tells you where one needs to focus. We showed this last too, but again, this is about coal, about which we will talk a lot more today. And again, similar story. In red, you see coal-fired power generation as of today. The gray is the difference projected through 2035. Again, you see that coal-fired power generation is expected to decline in the US, decline in the EU, decline elsewhere in the industrialized world. And look at China. It's expected obviously to rise. Same story, it's expected to rise more in China, than it declines in the US, the EU, and the rest of the industrialized world combined. So when we talk here about coal in China, we're essentially talking about coal in the world. Last one. Zhongying has some fascinating perspective on this one. But this is China electricity production. Again, not my numbers, International Energy Agency numbers. You see today, this is again electricity, not all energy. You see fossil fuels today are 80%. That's essentially exclusively coal in China. And you see wind and solar at 1%, nuclear at 2%. The rest of renewables are hydro and biomass basically at about 17%. And the change expected in 2035 is that fossil fuels will decline to just under 70%. Wind and solar go up from about 1 to about 11%. Nuclear goes up. And the other thing, as I mentioned last time, that's important to keep in mind is that these charts are sort of the same size. But obviously, the 2035 chart is going to be much bigger than the 2010 chart because China's electricity demand is expected to what, Zhongying? Double? Almost double by 2035? OK, so let's turn that off and let's get started. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
The first thing, why don't you just first tell us, what does the Energy Research Institute do within the NDRC? Because I think it's important to understand, do you make policy or are you advising policymakers? What do you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, our main function is provide the suggestion to the government, to the NDRC, mainly focus on the macro level, the China national level energy strategy, planning, policies, and related regulations.
Excellent. Now, we were talking, and you mentioned a fascinating statistic involving China's emissions versus the world's emissions, having to do with 10 billion tons. Why don't you explain that to people?
Yeah. So 2011, by the end of 2011, the ERI, we do some calculation according to the China emission inventory. Already exceed the, 8 billion tons. 8 billion tons
Chinese emissions.
China CO2 emissions. In past 10 years, from the 20, it should be the past 20 years, past 10 years, the China's economic growth quickly, very quickly. And also, in the same time, the energy consumption also increased very quickly. The annual increase rate, the average rate, that's reached the 8.8% in past 10 years.
8.8% annual growth.
Yeah, annual growth for energy.
In energy use.
Primary energy consumptions. Primary energy.
Compared to what? Roughly 1.5% in the US, maybe 1%.
Yeah, in US almost stable, not increase. So we do some draft calculations about the 2050. Since the 2011 to the 2050, we do some estimations. If our annual growth rate for energy, primary energy consumption, according to the 1.5% per year, that's not high, But the best date, we use the 2011 of total energy primary consumption. By the 2050, the total primary energy consumptions, in which 1/3 from the non-fossil fuel, in other words, from the clean energy, 1/3 from the clean energy, 2/3 from the fossil fuels. We estimate the total emissions, just like your one slide, that the CO2 emission will around the 10 billion tons of CO2
per year.
That's the huge and horrible Why? IPCC have a date, two goals. First goal is by the 2050 that the temperature increase not exceed the 2 centigrades. This is most of the countries of member of the IPCC agree this is goals. And also some experts also do another calculations. If we want to reach the 2 degrees goals, by the 2050, the world total CO2 emissions should reduce 50% of 1990s level. 1990s level, what is the CO2 emissions? The whole world, about the 20 billion tons. 20 billion tons. So if the half, 50% of the 20 billion tons, that means in the whole world, you cannot emission the CO2 not exceed 10 billion tons. So that's the problems.
Wait, let's just.
That's the problem. That's the problems. The China cannot account the total, the world, the CO2 emissions. Everybody maybe will kill China if the China emissions 10 billion tons of the CO2. So that's a very simple disease. So that's why I just said the IEA, the estimations.
Let me stop you for a second. I just want to make sure we sort of all understand this. So what we're saying here is China's current annual emissions of CO2 are on the order of 8 billion tons. So the ERI's expectation is that if in 2050 China's energy mix were such that 1/3 came from quote unquote clean energy, that is to say 1/3 came from something other than fossil fuels, which in itself would mark a significant departure from the situation today. If that were the case, China's annual emissions in 2050 would be 10 billion tons, which is exactly what the IPCC has said the world should not exceed in order to avoid what the IPCC regards as concerns about climate change. Now, remember back to the chart, China's not the only kid on the block, and there's India, and there's the United States and everyone else. So this is sort of the gravity of the extent of the issue that Zhongying's grappling with, and I just want to sort of have us set that as the stage. Now, you want to go back to this chart for a second? So, yeah. Because I know Zhongying actually has a different view of the world than the 2035 view here, so let's talk about that.
So that's why I said by the 2050 in China, if we want to keep our economic growth rate in future 20 or 30 years, by the 2050, our clean energy must account of total primary energy, at least, I think, the 2/3, above the 2/3.
So just to be clear, we're mixing apples and oranges a bit here. So we're talking here about electricity on this chart. Zhongying is talking about primary energy, which includes transportation. But broadly, it's not hugely different, right? So you're saying that it needs to be 2/3 something other than fossil fuels.
But the 2/3, that's the primary energy, at least. But if we see the electricity, the ratio should be the more high.
So what do you think is realistic for renewable energy?
Just the Americans, the area 1 year ago just launched the American electricity for 2050. That's reasonable as 90% from the renewable energy. 90% electricity could be from
the National Renewable Energy Laboratory did a study that said 90% electricity in the U.S. could come from renewables.
Yeah. I think this is for China also that should be the suitable for 90% of clean electricity, 90% from the renewable energy should. Okay. So far in China, the 80% the electricity from the coal. So if we want to clean in China by the 2050, that will be bigger change.
So big indeed. So this is 2035. This is the international.
if by the 2035 still keep the fossil fuel 63%, that's also, I think, that's impossible.
What do you mean it's impossible?
Because so far is how to say in China the coal production and the coal consumption already total coal consumption already accounted the world 50%.
Half of all coal used in the
and also we face the very serious environmental issues. So far in Beijing we have the new terms, the Beijing cough. That means pollutions that PM. So far we emphasize the PM 2.5 issues. That's very serious. Not only in Beijing.
This is particulate matter, right?
In the earlier of this year, in the around the coastline, eastern of China, the whole region, including the middle of China, faces this very serious air pollution issues because not too much wind. So that's cannot, how to say, the PM 2.5, the macro dirt, that issue is very serious, very serious.
And it's also not.
That's the real reason. That's because of the 80% reasons from the coal-fired plant and oil utilizations.
So by the way, some of that is not staying in China. Some of that's coming across the Pacific Ocean, and it contributes to LA's dirty air, right? So this is an issue not just sort of across the Pacific Ocean. So you heard it here first. You heard that the International Energy Agency says that renewable energy in China in 2035 will be roughly 11%, and Zhongying Wang has just told you he wants it to be 90%. So
no, 2035.
2050.
2050. Yeah.
Still quite a delta. So let's just talk. I want to talk about kind of the reality of a shift like that. What would need to happen for China to shift off of coal to that degree? What would have to happen in terms of government policy? What would have to happen in terms of the market?
So far, we are start a program in my organization and also for my team. That's the 2050 Renewable Energy Development Roadmap for China. Next year, we will finish these projects. So far, the central government also gives a big attention about the strategy, energy strategy study. So if we make clear for future pictures, then we go back. We must take some of the concrete measures. We cannot wait. So far, we have many problems. For example, there's the electricity system reform issues. We should set up the China's fully competing electricity market, but now, no. So that's the influence the great accept the renewable energy electricity.
So let's stop here and actually talk about this for a minute. How is it that the regulatory system with regard to electricity in China needs to be changed? Why does it need to be changed? Why does the regulatory system make it difficult to diversify sources of electricity? Before we get to how to change it, what is it about the current system that makes things difficult?
10 years, sure, 10 years ago, China started the electricity reform that separate the producer from the great companies. But that's 10 years ago. But after 10 years, no any progress about the system. So far, just produce a great spread. And great company and transmission company and distributor company still together. And also the dispatcher center, dispatcher function combine the great company together. So they have the high priorities. No high priority, they have the full rights make decisions. Which electricity should transmission to where. Then they don't dispatch according to the electricity products, the tariff dispatches the electricity product. I'll give you examples. In the Mongolia is independent the electricity company. And Beijing, Jinjintang, and the middle of China belong to the state grid. So that is the two companies. In the Mongolia, there are a lot of the wind resource. For state grid companies, for example, Beijing very nearby in the Mongolia, and Beijing very high load of electricity.
So let's just stop. Can everyone picture a map of China? So here's a map of China, right? This is China. It's my hand, and I don't know what the wedding ring is, but this is Inner Mongolia, or sort of Inner Mongolia is right here basically, and Beijing's kind of right here.
Yeah.
So anyway, go ahead. So there's a just actually, as is the case in the United States, where the midsection of the United States is the windiest section, and the load centers are on the coasts. Sorry, pick it up.
Each province they have their own coal-fired plant. So state companies they don't want to purchase too much the wind electricity from in the Mongolia. They want to use their own coal-fired plant electricity, their own wind farms electricities. They want to make their own benefit. That's benefit. They want to the local government. They want to their own local GDP because the central government end of this year, end of any year, they will evaluate the local government. Which your province the GDP that's high, that's good. So that's a problem. So any entity, enterprises, they just consider their own benefit. They don't take care of the whole country's environment issues, society issues. So that is the problem. So for future electricity system reform, I think that only two ways. One way is of just like California, independent ISO dispatcher should free out of the grid company. They should have their own rights, make decisions according to the real cost of electricity products and dispatches the electricity. The second way is maybe follow the European models. That's the TSO model. TSO models. But the TSO models, you must separate, not only separate the producer, you must separate distributor. So that's the TSO, just the middle.
Transmission service operator.
That's the middle of the electricity. That's, the producer can report their price, go to the market competing. The end user distributor also can report their price. What's the cost of the electricity I want to use? So TSO then makes the decision, make the balance.
So
a little bit like the ISO
in California. So I mean, your point is that what you would advocate is that there's essentially there's fundamental reform of the electricity system in China, a big deal. In which case there would be an independent operator that would make the decision of what kind of electricity, what sources of electricity come onto the grid in China, and in what merit order or in what priority those sources of electricity are sold off the grid, rather than what you're saying is the case now, which is that the people who run the wires make the decision about who can access those wires. The point being that there are, in the current model, what you're saying is that there are limits, that the people who have the wires now have an interest in not letting new entrants come onto those wires. And that, what you're saying, I think if I'm understanding, is that that inhibits renewable energy or other sources of energy from coming on the grid. Yeah?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I can give the examples. In China, the total electricity installed capacity almost same the US, almost same US. That's the but 80% of the total capacity is coal-fired. That's how much? That's 800 million kilowatt. 800 million kilowatt. The annual running hours, 2012, 5,000 hours per year. 5,000.
So these plants are getting run full out.
I think, yeah, 5,000 hours. Coal-fired plant. I think in U.S. maybe no more than 3,000 hours. So, less than the 3,000.
So the plants themselves, the coal-fired plants themselves that are on the system are being pushed hard to crank out a lot of electricity. All right, I want to stop here and I want to keep going a little bit on another aspect of coal, and that is, I want to talk, we've talked earlier in this series about carbon capture and storage.
Yeah.
Right, and that is the notion that if the world can figure out how to burn coal and then take the carbon dioxide that comes out of those coal-fired power plants and essentially stick that carbon dioxide underground, where hopefully it will be stored for a long time, then suddenly coal is fine to burn in a climate sense at least. What do you think about the prospects of carbon capture and storage?
In China, so far I don't think that we need the carbon capture the storage.
Why not? Why not?
We can reduce our running hours of a coal-fired plant, give the more space to the wind farm and PV stations. For example, if we reduce the running hours from the 5,000 hours to the 3,000 hours, we can install the additional 800 million kilowatt hour, 800 million kilowatt wind farms.
So your point is don't try to make coal
because
clean, just replace
in China,
coal.
average for wind source development, the annual running hours could be reach the 2,000 between the 2,000 and 2,200 hours.
How?
So, but after 10 years, 20 years, maybe we can reduce our coal-fired plant from this 3,000 hours into the 1,000 hours. Then we can quickly reduce the CO2 emissions. After 1,000 hours, if we still want to keep the coal-fired plant, maybe in that time, maybe we can find some of the carbon capture measures, not storage. Maybe we can use the CO2 for some of the valuable production or industries.
Beer and Coca-Cola.
Yeah? Yeah. Like this. So.
Okay, so
if we just use the carbon capture technology, that's enough, and low cost, and we can still keep the coal-fired plant.
So the vision here then that you're talking about is that China doesn't simply make coal burning cleaner. China phases out coal burning and phases in something.
We take the all kind of measures, for example, desulfur and the
NOx.
The NOx.
Taking out
and also
taking out pollutants other than
and also the macro dirt. But all of the measures we take, coal-fired plant, you cannot solve the PM 2.5 issues. You cannot solve the PM 2.5 issues. You can desulfur the NOx, the macro dirt, but you cannot deal with the PM 2.5 issues.
So,
and also you cannot solve the water protection issues.
So this is actually a big issue. Let's talk about water for a second. I actually heard someone say that he thought that the impediment to China's building out more coal-fired power plants was going to be water. There was not going to be enough water to cool all the coal-fired power plants that China has on the drawing board.
But so far, they have we have some of the demonstration plant, the new power plant that use air cooling.
Coal-fired power plants that use air cooling.
Air cooling.
But do you think that water is going to be an impediment to, is a shortage of water going to stop the development of coal-fired power plants in China? No.
So that's the mainstream. That most coal-fired, they still need the coal.
They need water. They need water.
Yeah.
And is there enough water to supply all of the plants that China is planning?
That's a problem.
That's a problem.
For example, if you want to use water, you must construct the coal-fired plant in the eastern of the China,
near the coast,
middle of China, near coast. If you construct the coal-fired plant nearby the mining, but the western of the regions, no water. So that's the problem.
Right, and environmentally, there's a desire to construct coal-fired power plants somewhere other than the east coast of China, away from the population centers. So the idea is that if you build power plants essentially in the center of China, you build high-voltage transmission wires to the cities, then the pollution that comes from those coal-fired power plants is at least away from the population centers in China. But what you're saying is that's a problem because there's not water in those places. Okay, so let's talk about renewable energy a little bit more, where you're spending a lot of your time. One of the things that I suspect is in the minds of a lot of people here is the whole tariff fight over solar panels going on right now, and an expectation that the European Union is going to hit China with very large tariffs on solar panels. So the allegation is that Chinese solar panel producers have been dumping solar panels onto the world market at below their cost of production, driving out of business American companies, European companies. What's your view on that?
That's in the present time, and also in the future, maybe several months, have the influence, has a big influence to the China PV industries. But I think after half year, the China market will expand. We will open. So far, our government in the final phase will publish the solar PV tariff policies. Already consultant comments, different sides. From the enterprises, from the association, from the research institute, from the related ministry. So I think we will quickly launch the policies. If the policy launched, China's PV market will be expanded quickly.
Within China?
Yeah, within China. So that will resolve so far the problems, I think.
That'll solve the problem of overcapacity.
End of last year, the central government already make the new goals for the 2015 year for the solar power. That is the original goals is 20 gigawatts, 21 gigawatts by the 2015. So far, we already adjusted to the 35 gigawatts by the 2015. So that means in next 3 years, each year, we must, in China market, internal market, domestic market, each year must at least install the 10 gigawatt.
So to be clear, the global market for solar is now about 40 gigawatts.
No, 40. Last year, 29 gigawatts.
But if you include what's going to happen this year, presumably what's going to happen this
most
year?
Most experts estimate this year around the 30 gigawatts, the whole world.
So 10 gigawatts
that means
China, one third of the global capacity for solar being added in China every year. So what you're saying is that if China does what the policy says, China should expand its domestic solar market enough to sop up all the overcapacity in the market. But I just want to bring you back to the other question, which is this dumping question. has China been dumping solar panels on the world market? Has it been violating the World Trade Organization rules or no?
I don't know. I think the Minister MOFTAG will take some of the measure and negotiate with the European. In other words, I done some of the calculations. If according to the present the policy of the European, that's around the 47% of tax. That means China products little bit high. The cost a little bit high than European companies' cost.
If the EU imposes this 47%?
Yeah, little bit high. So little bit high. That's some problem, but not big issues.
Because the market will grow enough.
Yeah. Domestic growth, and also the company also will have to say make the innovation themselves.
I want to ask you one other thing about renewables, and that is, it's a fascinating time right now in terms of policy for renewable energy in China. There are a lot of changes that the NDRC is making to renewable energy policy to try to rein in some of what had happened. So for instance, the feed-in tariff in China is being changed. The Golden Sun program of subsidies is likely to be changed in China. On the theory, I think that there were problems, there were inefficiencies in the subsidies that existed thus far, and that China now wants to rationalize that system to make its policies more efficient. Can you talk about that?
The same things I just mentioned. The NDRC will launch a new policy for solar power. So that's the cancel. Maybe that's the include the original Golden Sun program support. For example, in new policies, we will, according to the different region, we separate as 4 regions according to the resource. Gives a different level of the price. This is for large PV stations. And for the city rooftop, that still will give some of the subsidies in the new policies. That make so far no final decisions, but in the draft documents, they give the suggestions. We want to use the net metering measures.
Net metering.
Net metering measures for the city rooftop, the PV station. And if you some the rich electricity sell to the grid, the government will give additional 0.35 yuan per kilowatt hours subsidies.
So two important things in terms of a restructuring of the policy environment in China. One is that whereas there has been a feed-in tariff for solar for a few years, I think for about 4 years, historically it's been one subsidy for the whole country. And what's now changed is that the subsidy is being tailored to the solar resource in different parts of the country, on the theory that you're spending money more wisely when you're tailoring money to how much sun there is. And second of all, the change in the Golden Sun program.
Golden Sun program, that's the Golden Sun program that gives a subsidy to the investment. That's some problems. When you construct the rooftop, maybe you don't produce the electricity, but also you get the subsidy. That's the problem. Just like the American, the policies support the wind farm development. Before that, so far is the PTC, production tax credit. Before that is the
investment tax credit.
Yeah, investment tax credit. Investment tax credit, that's not good measure, because you develop the wind farm, maybe you don't produce the electricity, no contribute, no contribution to the society. So that's the problem. So far we change. We give the subsidy to the electricity. So that's I think, the efficiency, just like your PTC.
This is a theme we've talked about in here before, right? About the changes in the efficiency of the subsidy programs. So we're going to open this up to your questions in a couple of minutes. I just want to whip through a couple of other things very quickly. One is shale gas. Talk about China has a massive shale gas resource, if you believe what you hear. To what extent will China develop its shale gas? How easy or difficult will it be?
That's still face the challenges of for shale gas development in China. Roughly, we said we have the rich resource in China, but in fact, not clear. Not clear. We should do the detailed resource assessment. This is the first key points. The second is technology. That's in China, compared to China and the US, our shale gas is very deeper on the ground compared to the US. And also in China, we also face just like the coal-fired plant, we need a lot of water. But if you develop shale gas, also needs water. So far present technologies. So that's the problem for us. So resource not real clear. Technology also clear. So
technology
for future,
not clear or clear? Not clear.
Yeah. For future, the picture also not clear for China shale.
We're happy to leave you with a clear picture as you walk out the door.
But anyway, the government want to get more shale gas.
Nuclear energy. What about the prospects for nuclear?
Nuclear, just keep the. So far, we already have almost 12 gigawatts under running. And also we have another 30 gigawatt under constructions for nuclear power plant. I think by the 2020, maybe 40 to 60 gigawatts. But 40, no problem, 40 gigawatts of nuclear power plants. 60, that's some problem. What's the problem so far in China? You difficult find the suitable size, not raw material, not the technology, just you cannot suitable size. The central government already make decisions not construct the new nuclear power plant in the inland. If you find the site near coastline, you can do, but it's difficult.
This is a cooling issue?
Yeah, no.
What's the why?
No cooling issue. That's how to say, maybe in the eastern regions, that also the residential has residential intensity, high intensity regions. So, because so far China anyway. Anyway, even we are developing country, but our economy already second one of the world. So the people also want to consider their safe the quality, their living qualities. So if you very high intensity residential regions, maybe some people will come here. Objection. So that's a problem.
This is actually a really interesting thing to consider because I think in the United States we often have the view of China as a place where Beijing, the government in Beijing says something and it just happens. And what we're hearing here is that nuclear power plants are not going to be built because there's local opposition. Anyone heard of a word called NIMBY? Not in my backyard. Similar phenomenon, right? We are not that different. Let me just ask you one other thing and then we'll open this up, and that is, We talked about industry, in the context of the solar industry. There's quite a lot of discussion in the United States, and I know interest on the Stanford campus in innovation, energy innovation. So how do you think about global energy innovation and what China does best and what the United States does best?
United does the best, I'm sure. China not the best. The last month I just visited the U.S. Attend the UVIG annual workshop, UVIG, the Wind Grid Connected workshop last month, and visited Kansas. There is a university that's construct the new wind turbine testing platform that can test the 15 megawatt wind turbine. Even now, I think nobody knows what's kind of 15 megawatt wind turbine prototype.
So a 15 megawatt wind turbine is 3 or 4 times the size of the largest
so far,
most
that's 6 megawatt, 5 megawatt, maybe some companies develop 10 megawatt wind turbine. But 15 megawatt, what's the 15 megawatt? But in your country already construct the testing platform. This platform can provide the whole country's enterprises. So you can see your innovation, technology innovation, that's very good.
Okay, thank you. We're going to open this up to questions. Yeah, Marty, go ahead.
I want to pick up on the last point of innovation and the acknowledgement that U.S. innovation is at least further along than in China. And I'm trying to reconcile that with the goal of getting to 90% renewables by 2050. And we're thinking about the policies that are necessary to be able to allow U.S. or other parts of the world's innovation to be deployed into China. I will tell you, I'm an investor, and I was an investor in solar technologies, and we lost every dollar we invested in solar technologies as a result of things that happened in the solar market as crystalline silicon scaled up in China. And so I'm thinking about what things are necessary in the opening of the markets, primarily the financial markets, because right now there is no investment into renewables for new technologies here in the U.S. because it's all been lost. How do we get the money that's in China to invest in U.S. innovation that can then ultimately be deployed back in China?
That's almost impossible so far. That's
I recognize that's impossible.
We hope.
To do that, aren't you? Is there any hope of getting to 90% renewables by 2050?
Your point is that without American technology being deployed in China...
Well, I'm not limited just to American, global technology outside of China.
Do you know the Goldwind?
Goldwind, one of China's largest wind turbine companies.
Yeah. They have the business in U.S. They also have business in Germany, and also the Goldwind have the research institute in Germany. I think they also want to buy some of the research institute in U.S. and investment in U.S. But some of the regulations and some of the problems. But if you come to China, if you have the advanced technology, you go to China investment, I think we are very welcome, no problem.
I understand that. And I can't make the return on the capital that we're doing here because I can't get my money out.
I see. Problem.
Other questions? In the back. Yeah, E, hi.
Hi. Could you talk a little more about what China is doing to make sure that the grid is it's ready to take in all the renewables that you're planning in terms of technology, making sure that, like, for example, the intermittency of solar and wind what kind of upgrades to the grid are you doing to make sure that the grid is actually ready to take in?
So it's just for those of you who didn't hear, the question is, what is China doing to make its grid more flexible and more robust to facilitate, among other things, a higher percentage of renewables?
I mentioned the issues. The China electricity, that is a complicated problems. China electricity must reform. If we keep the present situation, there's no way.
So is it a technology problem? Or
No. That's the mechanism, system mechanism. Just I said, the present electricity system must go to the one of the two ways, ISO ways or TSO ways. Must one of them.
So your point is it's not a technology issue with the grid, it's a market issue and an economic issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? I'm going to give a bias here for students. So be straight with me if you're a student. Thank you.
I'm a student.
Okay.
In fact, I have two questions. One question is about the electricity reform. You mentioned about the separation between the grid part, the transmission grid part, and the distribution grid part. Are there any possibility that in the near future, the NDRC give up the right to determine the electricity price, but to give the right to determine the price to the market? Because currently, the NDRC determine the electricity price annually, rather than let the market determine the price. So are there any possible in the near future 5 years for the electricity reform, the NDRC can give up this right? This is the first question. The second question is about the renewable. We know the new renewable like solar and wind is fluctuate and unpredictable. So in US, they use natural gas power and hydropower to compensate the fluctuation. But in China, there's a lot of coal and there's very little part of the gas. So how the Chinese electricity system now to compensate the renewable, the fluctuation of the renewable? Do they use coal? That's very strange because coal is really slow ramping generator.
Okay, I'm going to stop. Thank you. So the first question is, will the NDRC essentially liberalize the market and allow the market to determine the price of electricity energy rather than the NDRC?
If the electricity system not reformed, the NDRC cannot give up of the tariff make decision rise. Because so far, this morning we talk about this and this noon. So far the electricity of China, that's the transmission distributor combined together, that is a black box. That's a black box. We don't know, we just clear the producer's price. We just clear the end user price. We don't know the transmission price. What is the cost? In the world, in European, in US, the transmission line that cannot make the big benefit because the transmission line companies just provide service.
So the market can't work unless, in your view, unless transmission and distribution are separated. The market can't set a price.
Must is separate. Otherwise, you independent ISO.
And his second question is, how do you back up renewables?
That's the many, so far in China, no problem. I just mentioned the coal-fired plant, so far the annual running hours is 5,000 hours. So they have and also we have 100 million kilowatt coal-fired plant. That every year we have for the 800 million kilowatt of capacity, we have 4,000 hours adjust the space.
So your point is that there's plenty of coal capacity to back up renewables?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, no problem, because in US, last month I come to the US, attend the UVIC meeting. Some experts of the US, they said they can reduction the reduction running hours for coal-fired plant below than 1,000 hours. 800 hours, 700 hours, no problem.
So there's a lot of room to go in terms of the using.
Yeah. This is just the. After 20, 50, after 10 or 20 years, that will be a smart grid and battery storage technologies, and also solar PV and wind could hybrid. Also could
they
hybrid.
Can complement each other. Other students, so students here, yes. And then I promise we'll open up. Go ahead, yeah.
As you just mentioned, smart grid, I kind of, could you please make some comments on demand-side management in terms of and its role in the energy picture in China?
So the question is demand-side management, not just figuring out new sources of energy, but how to improve energy efficiency, how to reduce wasteful use of energy. Yeah. So what is China doing in terms of energy efficiency as opposed to simply changing the sources of energy? Yeah.
Well, I cannot reach the questions. In China, so far the energy efficiency, that energy conservation is the priorities. We just keep our technologies, standards, and compare our technology standards to compare our technology with Japan technology, US technology. If our standards are almost same, we didn't take care. If our technology very old, backwards, we should change our technologies. So when we do future energy demand forecast, we don't use the backward technology for that. We should use the advanced technology, energy efficient technologies for forecast the future energy demands.
So you're assuming.
So we already consider the energy efficient use also. So that's different. So I said we need how much renewable energy. That means that we will need. This is the renewable energy.
You've already taken into account an assumption that you're going to get much more energy efficient, and still
that's
this
true.
Is what
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We have time for maybe 2 questions. So quick questions. If you have the most important question in the room, raise your hand. Okay. Right there in the green shirt.
So I'd like to know what is going to be the primary driver for the changes that need to occur? Is it going to be environmental considerations that relate to the health of the people? Is it going to be the limitations on the economic growth of China and the amount of energy that it needs? And finally, is it going to be driven, just like the comment you made, about international standards that China would like to adhere to? What is going to be the primary driver for changes to the infrastructure, to the policies, to the regulations, and the investments?
Did everyone hear that question?
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay. That's how to say it. That's the energy security we should consider. Energy security. The second is not second, the parallel important, environment issues.
But to be clear, when you say environmental issues, are you talking about climate change and carbon emissions, or are you talking about PM 2.5 and the stuff you can see and smell?
In China, that's the same. Climate change and the environment, local environment is the same, because China consumes too much of coal. So that's the same issues. Climate change, if we solve our environment issues, we also solve the climate change issues in China.
One last question in the back there, yeah. Joel.
I'm trying to reconcile 2 things you're saying. One is the electricity restructuring. You want to, have an open, competitive market, separate the suppliers from the distributors, have the market set the price. On the other hand, you have this vision of a huge amount of distributed solar. I mean, I would think that coal would be the thing that would win win out in the market under the system that you describe. And the only country in the world that has a very large sustained market for solar in a distributed way is Germany. And it has a system where the government sets the price. I think very successfully. It's been continually lowering the price over time. But I'm just trying to understand, what is your vision for how the electricity market is really going to function?
That the electricity market must go to the must go to the fully competing market. This is the way. This is the way. We must use the cheap electricities.
But that's coal, isn't it?
But no. The coal in China not cheap. Not cheap because we didn't include the environment protection cost. That's the serious issues.
So your take, Chris, I mean, what we're talking about here, I think, is an assumption that there will be a price on carbon, and therefore, if there's a price on carbon, who wins out in a market system is different from what the situation is today. Is that what we're talking about? That you're suggesting that the government impose a price here so that who wins out, coal versus renewables or something else, is different than is the case today.
Yeah, for example, there's these pictures. That is in past 30 years, a cumulative consumes the coal, produces these. Even in future, reduce the coal, you still need invest the money to change this is the situation. For example, about water pollutions. For example, in Yunnan province, the Kunming, Kunming city, how to say the Tianpo, that's the lake. That's a lake. That's a lake. They're very serious pollutants.
Water pollution.
Yeah.
Okay. We are going to stop it here. We've gone a couple of minutes over, and I know there are more questions, but I really appreciate you guys coming and listening. Thank you so much to Zhongying for making the long trip. I hope we understand things a little bit better. I feel like I do. Let me just say, again, thanks for, I think a lot of you have been extraordinarily attentive over the past month and a half with this series. I really appreciate it. All of these sessions are being recorded and are viewable online at energyseminar.stanford.edu. There will be a delay of perhaps 4 or 5 days on this one, but they'll all be up there, I think, for perpetuity, so you can see that. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.